Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius on a Thursday afternoon. I am John Ledyard from PewterReport.com. With me today is JC Allen, also from PewterReport.com, and we are joined by special guest, attorney Brad Spielberger, recently dubbed attorney Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus. Brad, first of all, congratulations. I know you have been studying that bar. You've been getting ready to pass. You got it. So congratulations, sir, on the last test you'll hopefully ever have to take in your life.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully now my words carry a little more weight, so people will trust my analysis a little more.
That's right. Yeah, that's one way to look at it for sure. The other way could be you might be the brunt of a lot of jokes now. We're not going to make any on this show, but we are glad and we're very happy for you as we consider you a valuable friend of the podcast and friend of PewterReport.com. For sure, we are happy for you, and we appreciate you taking some time to be with us today to talk salary caps and contracts and the upcoming 2022 offseason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You remarked off air that this is kind of one of the more fun teams to talk about cap with. Why do you think that is with Tampa Bay and your role as a cap expert?
Yeah, so, every team is different, but there are some clubs that are very particularly unique in the way they approach this, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are certainly on that list. But as you responded pre-show, the cool thing is that now they are challenging those conventions and kind of zigging as opposed to their normal convention, because they have to, right? And they want to continue to contend and add all this talent and keep all this talent. So it's just been cool to see them kind of adapt their philosophy to their situation, and they're going to have to do the exact same thing again this offseason.
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing. This is an offseason coming up. JC, we talked about it yesterday on the show. It's an offseason coming up that's going to present, obviously, a myriad of challenges for the Bucs. We said that about last offseason, too, and they ended up bringing back everybody. This will be probably more daunting. So, Brad, let me ask you this, and JC and I will kind of alternate questions as we go here, but let me ask you this. With the upcoming offseason that the Bucs face, do you consider this, even though the cap will swell and rather than decrease as it did last year, do you consider this to be one of the even a more daunting offseason in terms of being able to bring people back than last year was?
I would say that if both of the cap situations were the same, then I would say it was more daunting. As you mentioned, obviously the cap drop changes things, but it's funny. I released a top 5 players at each position for free agency, just where it is today. The number 1 wide receiver was a Buccaneer, Chris Godwin. The number 1 corner was Carlton Davis. The number 2 tight end was Rob Gronkowski, and so on and so forth. So Ryan Jensen was the number 1 center. I could keep listing off names. Yeah, they have a lot of very good, very important players hitting free agency.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for sure. JC, we talked about a lot of those players yesterday. Yes. I know there's a couple at the top of our list though that we probably want to ask Brad about today, because everybody's got their fingers crossed to whether a couple key guys are coming back to Tampa Bay or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the next year, we still don't know what the cap figure is going to be, but the Bucs project around $29 million in cap space projections, early projections, depending on where you go. I don't know what you have them pegged at, but with that, one of their biggest free agents to sign is Chris Godwin, and the franchise tag is projected to be around $19 million. And John and I kind of talked, and that's, I think, where we think he'll start at in contract negotiations. With $29 million, how do you afford to bring people back first off?
Yeah, so this is a really cool point that I was talking about this earlier with respect to this how you look at cap space for 2022 and compare across teams. And so, yes, the Bucs are near the bottom of that list at overthecap.com and have a bunch of decisions to make. But the thing, too, is that they have a ton of contracts where they can push money out into the future. Donovan Smith has void years in his recent extension for a reason. I'm sure they'll do it with him. Ali Marpet could be a candidate there as well. There's a bunch of other names, so on and so forth. And so if you look at, like, for example, the Cowboys, they're currently listed as negative, but they have 7 guys with salaries over $10 million. They have Dak and Amari at $20 million. They can take almost that entire amount and push it into the future. So it is different team to team. The Bucs have some work to do, but they'll be okay.
Now, how do you do that without ending up in a situation where the Saints are? It seems year after year they're over the cap and they're having to panic and structure, but they still end up bringing guys in. It seems like magic every year. How do you avoid that situation for the Bucs, who, as we've talked about, have been really careful over the years with what they do with their cap space? And now, like John said, they're starting to take these risks. How do you weigh those risk versus rewards with this team, with the cap?
Yeah, 100%. So when you kind of go all in as the Saints did, and the Eagles are still in a bit of a tough spot as well, and they're a team next year where they're already kind of near the bottom of cap space, and they have very few contracts they can actually change and maneuver around. So yeah, what you have to do is I think you have to balance it, and everything is cohesive, right? So you take some charges up front and also do some pushing money into the future. So obviously Godwin on the franchise tag, but like Mike Evans in the past would have a ton of money up front, and there's other contracts like that. And when you do that with the cash, it keeps players happy and they're getting big cash early on. And that way you don't have to extend or rework these deals. And it all kind of works together.
It's interesting because we talked about that kind of last year with pushing money down the road. And it was the first time the Bucs had really delved into that and they started to push some money down the road. We had you on after free agency and the dust settled, and you kind of said, right now it's not really at a level where it'd be super debilitating for them down the road. They're just kind of using it responsibly still. We're going to get into the specifics of these player situations, but one thing I'm curious about is how much of a crossroads are they at this season? Like with an offseason where they're pushing a lot of money down the road, if they want to bring back most of these players, which like we said, probably can find a way to do, but it's at what cost to the future? Are they in danger? I say danger because it's also, and I'm in quotes, because it's also a good thing because it means they're probably going to be better this upcoming season, but are they in danger of getting into Saints territory in terms of being pretty cap strapped for a while?
So the beauty again with their timing is that I think so a lot of misconception around this as well. The cap will go up next year in 2022, but they've already set a ceiling on that number at about 208 million. So the true spike will be 2023. And I think what Tampa and a lot of teams, I think Arizona did this a little bit as well, is they're essentially planning for 2023 to have a big chunk of dead cap. A lot of money going to players that aren't going to be there anymore, kind of, take their wounds and then go from there. But if the cap jumps to, 240 million or something like that in 2023, then look, if 40 million of that is going to, dead cap, it's not good, but you can definitely still work around it.
Interesting. I love that because that thinking out in future years in terms of what the cap will be is very different. The Saints they were in a bad spot anyway, but they kind of definitely got screwed with the cap going back down or whatever. That was probably harder for them than really many teams in recent memory almost. So here's what I want to ask to start things off, because it's the number one free agent that I think on most Bucs fans, not all, but most Bucs fans' mind is Chris Godwin. Last year went into free agency. We had you on. We talked at length about this on the show, and then I think you and I have talked and texted a ton about it, and just kind of like, what is the market for Chris Godwin? Look at the market for wide receivers last year. Free agency was really bad pretty much across the board. Golladay did end up getting paid, but it was kind of late in the process. I guess some surprising guys got paid early on, and Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, something like that. But Juju Smith-Schuster and some others that a lot of people thought would get something hardly got anything. And Godwin, I don't know, maybe look at that and was like, I'm okay playing on the prove it franchise tag. I know what I can do if I get to play 16 games, which he did not last year. Now, if he does, so far so good. He's leading the team in most categories, catches, I believe, and yards, and is up there in touchdowns as well. And so when you look at Chris Godwin's situation, do you think he gets affected by the suddenly dwindling market for wide receivers, or is he kind of in the rung above that, the need for that concern, especially if he keeps up his current pace?
It's going to be a really interesting question, because I still think it's a bit of a new phenomenon to where teams now think they can take a guy with a top 100 pick at receiver and he can be productive pretty much from day one. And of course, that's not every player, but we have seen a lot of examples of that. So I think that'll be interesting. And also there's a lot of talent at wide receiver again. And so just like last year, maybe some teams will make those signings early. Then yes, like New England paid too much for Aguilar and Bourne. There's a couple other not great contracts, but when they get those done, it just shrinks the market for, how many teams could be in on Godwin. So I'll also say this. He had the injuries last year. He's had a couple of injuries kind of throughout his career. I was very surprised when I was told what his market and kind of what he was hearing from Tampa, where that was at. It was less than I would have guessed by a good amount of money. I think, yes, he's having a good season, so that number will definitely go up. And obviously he didn't accept the deal, so he felt he was worth more than that. But Mike Evans is a very interesting piece of all of this, because I know last offseason their argument essentially was, why should we pay you more than Mike Evans? And that's a bit of an unfair argument, because when the cap goes up, everyone's contracts go up. And so, $16.5 million for Mike Evans in 2018 is not $16.5 million per year now. But nevertheless, I think the Bucs will be able to get it done because I do think it's going to come in a bit below what his talent dictates. I think he likes Tampa. I think he loves the situation. And look, if he gets a Galladay offer or near, 18 million per year, maybe 20 million per year, I think he'd be open to it.
Yeah, interesting. I want to hear a number, but first, let's talk about our friends over at Celsius because they are sponsoring today's podcast, as they do all of the Pewter Report podcasts. They'll sponsor the show. Celsius powers active life every day with essential functional energy, and all of the great flavors that they offer all taste good. It's unbelievable how many flavors they have and how good they all taste, and how there's no sugar in any of them. They're good for you. They give you the energy boost that you need to be productive, get through your day if you haven't slept much, like your boy over here. And there's not the crash that comes from other energy drinks too. So you're not getting the crash. You're not getting a lot of the bad stuff you get in other energy drinks. So make sure you check out Celsius. You can go to Celsius.com and use the store locator to find out which Celsius are near you, where they sell Celsius near you, or you can just go on to Amazon and you can use the subscribe and save option, get Celsius coming right to your door on the regular basis, or you can click those banner ads over at pewterreport.com and order yourself some Celsius as well. So we appreciate Celsius obviously being the title sponsor of the show and being just such a tasty beverage. Brad, let me ask you this with Chris Godwin. What's the number looking like then? Okay, you talk about do you want to pay more than Mike Evans? I look at the wide receiver contracts in the NFL right now, and I'm saying, okay, well maybe you're not in the Julio Hopkins territory in terms of average per year, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The cap goes back up. Is 20 million per year crazy for Chris Godwin? Will it be well under that? Am I crazy for thinking he could start asking in the 20 range?
I think he now can definitely start asking in the 20s. I mean, obviously, Devontae Adams' deal will be interesting, and that'll affect everything. Depending how big of a deal he gets, it might have a trickle-down effect. But like I said, last offseason, I had Godwin around 21, and I can tell you that the offer that he didn't accept, but I think was maybe close to accepting, was about $5 million per year less than that. So, like I said, right under Mike Evans. And so now I think he'll surpass him. I don't think he would take kind of a team-friendly deal, but 20 million per year, I guess, is kind of a number where I have it at. Like I think if a team offered him 4 years, $80 million, whatever team that is, I think he would very strongly consider it. And that might sound like a ton and like a lot, but you can make an argument he should ask for 23 million per year and might get it because he's a really good player. There are teams that are in desperate need of wide receiver help. And so he could try to go that route if he wanted to.
Now, how does a franchise tag work and all that? Obviously, he's tagged this year. He's tagged next year. It starts at $19 million. But we know about that third year, the big bump in that. If he's negotiating, where does that bring his top value, his top number, compared to where we think his bottom number is around 19? And what teams actually have money to offer that would be in play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
100%. And so the franchise tag, even when it's not applied, the way every contract negotiation tends to work is the team and agent will say, okay, if we were to tag this guy twice, because that is always kind of the threat that the team leverages, here's what those would be. And then we're going to work off of that. So I would say that for them, they would say, okay, if the franchise tag is going to be around $19 million, that's not our floor, but that's kind of like, that's where the conversation starts because you're going to, if you're not going to sign him, you're going to give him $19 million for one season. So why would we then take less than $19 million for a couple seasons? Obviously you're buying out years from the team perspective. And like I said, contracts always go up. So the player is kind of forfeiting the potential to make more, obviously with the security being, the return they get. So the franchise tag number is a perfect number. It's going to set where they work around. And I think it'll land around that number.
And you think minimal chance he would get slapped with the tag again, or how do you see that working out?
I think
especially with the other guys.
Carlton Davis, I think, complicates matters there. And it's a $15 million franchise tag or around 15 for cornerback. And obviously, they have a need at corner. They don't really have a need at receiver. It's always good to have a bunch of good ones. But yeah, so I think that's why they're not going to be able to leverage that tag as much as they were last year. Because I think Carlton Davis, the thing there is he sees a guy like a Marshawn Lattimore, get top of line cornerback money in the NFC South, a guy who's missed time with injuries, a guy who almost got suspended for, so on and so forth. So Davis shouldn't be taking, much less than 18 million per year himself. So I think they need the tag for him, and that will lead to them having a true negotiation with Chris Godwin.
Now, who's out there to really compete for Chris Godwin services that has the money, that has the cap space that the Bucs should be really worried about? You said, if a team comes out and offers them 4 at 80 or higher than that. What are those teams? What do they look like? What do the situations look like at quarterback and kind of, weather? Because I think that plays a lot too into Godwin's decision as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And so this first answer probably it doesn't sound like a good one, but at this point, I would be surprised if the Chicago Bears and Allen Robinson even talk about an extension. I just don't see it at this point. And I think the Bears will want to get a legitimate number one option for Justin Fields to be able to, rely on and lean on. I know they love Darnell Mooney on the outside, so they wouldn't have an issue if Godwin was primarily playing on the inside. They think Mooney has the potential to potentially become a number one guy. I haven't really bought into that yet, but I think he could be a very good number two, or him and Chris Godwin could be a phenomenal, kind of 1-1A situation. So I think Chicago is a team to watch there. I think the Chargers are interesting as well. If they don't bring back Mike Williams, who's having a great year, but they were kind of afraid to approach an extension talk with him this past offseason. He's on the 5th-year option this year. Like I said, playing better, but has always kind of had issues with injuries and stuff like that. I guess him and Keenan Allen are a bit redundant, but I think they're a name to watch as well.
Yeah, they're definitely a name to watch, especially if Joe Lombardi stays there. He watched what Chris Godwin did in that division for a long time, and he had a good slot himself, and Michael Thomas a lot of time using there. So, and like you said, Godwin is kind of one of those guys that can do so many different things. It's hard to not imagine, that you could talk about some of these other receivers that were in free agency last year. Hard to see any of them as well-rounded as Godwin's skill set, which is why I think he's just kind of above the conversation of the market dropping for wide receivers. So some good perspective on Chris Godwin there. Let's move to Carlton Davis, because you talked about him and potentially the tag. Here's the struggle with Carlton Davis, Brad. First 2 years were fine. He was growing. He was getting better. They were clearly very optimistic about him heading into year 3. We were all kind of surprised at how excited the coaching staff was. And then he really played pretty well other than the Tyreek Hill game, which I don't know if anybody would have held up in that matchup in year 3. He was really impressive. And then he started off this season really well, but then gets hurt halfway through his 4th game of the year. Maybe he'll be back for the Washington game, maybe the week after, but he's probably going to miss a third of the season at least. And then we'll see how he plays is probably a big part of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how he plays to finish off the year, probably a big part of it. How he plays, maybe if they get to the playoffs, could be a big part of it with teams. The recency bias thing is probably pretty real, but I think last year he took steps toward becoming like a really quality number one corner. And I would say at some points he was even the most valuable player, just because the drop off with Murphy Bunting and Dean last season was so significant. He was really valuable to them last year. There's also this part of me that thinks maybe this scheme isn't perfect for him unless they play more press man. And, he's a fine zone corner, but he's definitely at his best in press man. They are playing more press man recently. I feel like there's a lot of moving factors and variables with the Carlton Davis situation. Even if he plays like basically, let's say how he started the season. So he doesn't go crazy and look like the number one corner in the league, but he keeps playing solid, really good football, clearly the team's best corner, yada, yada. When the season ends, what do you think happens with him? Is this a tag situation? Is this like, now we want a contract right away with you, want to lock you up long-term? Is he worth $15 million per year? If he plays at that level, how do you see the situation with him?
Yeah. So with him, I would say, I think a tag 100% is in play, and whether they want to extend him or not, I think they'll just do that and then figure things out from there. I think his situation is one where scarcity is going to drive a lot of the value. If you look at the top cornerbacks available, beyond him, the guys that are young, the only other name that jumps out to me is Dante Jackson in Carolina. And obviously Carolina has added 11 cornerbacks in the last month. So they say they like him, and they say that bringing in Gilmore, bringing in Henderson, drafting JC Horn top 10, they've said consistently that does not, impact their decision to extend him or not, but who knows if that's true. After that, the list is guys like Stephon Gilmore and Joe Hayden and a lot of 30-plus-year-old players. So even if Carlton Davis does show, some vulnerabilities, I still think they will apply the tag. Jalen Ramsey has been a blessing for every other team. I think that $20 million number is still a ceiling that players respect Jalen Ramsey so much. They don't even argue like, I want more than him because I'm the next guy up. I think that'll last one more offseason, and then we'll see someone break through and want to get more than Ramsey. But I think if the Bucs, if he accepted, Shaq Barrett's contract, essentially $18 million, $17 million, I think both sides would sign it in a heartbeat and have no problem with that.
Wow. So you think Carlton could generate that kind of per year? 17, 18
yeah,
range.
I do. And actually, to the scheme point, which is interesting, maybe Todd Bowles staying or not staying could be interesting too. Maybe if he gets hired elsewhere, maybe they bring a guy in and they say, all right, we're going to extend Carlton and make him the focal point. And because of that, we're going to hire a head coach that wants to play more press man and do things that cater to his skill set.
Wow, 17, 18.
Well, I mean, if you look at the franchise tag, it's projected to be around 17.5 million right there. So if they do tag him, that's what they're working with. But the transition tag is only around 14. What's the big difference between the franchise transition tag? For the viewers out there, and do you think that transition tag is at least a possibility too to kind of start negotiations at a lower point rather than the franchise?
Great question. So I'm well versed in this because my Chicago Bears did it with Kyle Fuller, and it's generally not a route you want to go unless there's way more questions. And I don't know if people remember, but Kyle Fuller, there was rumors that he intentionally sat out part of a season when the Bears stunk, and he just didn't really want to play, and he missed some time to injury and stuff like that. And they still went this route. And so what the transition tag does is you apply the tag, like you said, there's a lower value, but other teams can then sign that player to an offer sheet, and you get a right of first refusal as the original team. So the Green Bay Packers ended up signing Kyle Fuller to a deal. Chicago accepted it, took it on anyways. It doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, to use it in the NFL unless you are comfortable letting the guy walk, because you have to kind of dictate that the other team dictates the terms of the contract, which is part of the reason Fuller got cut this offseason. So there's kind of that as well. As Green Bay, it's not a poison pill, but Green Bay kind of structured in a difficult way. Long story short, because the scarcity factor, if they do the transition tag, someone else is going to sign him for a deal that is going to be huge. And so they're going to have to match it anyways. So why not just sign a deal on your terms, or just don't tag him at all?
Right. So don't tag him at all. That'd be I
should say don't transition tag him.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
franchise
All right,
tag or just sign him. Yeah.
Okay. Understood. I was gonna say, oh, should they not? I got you. Okay. So interesting. So the franchise tag, that would be 18. I mean, that would be on the
more than what we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah. I wasn't sure. I don't know where the contract goes with Carlton Davis, just because I don't even know when he's coming back this season. He hasn't been activated for return, and maybe, but you're right. Like, I still think he's good. I mean, it's hard to tell with guys that don't have, he plays in a small market. They don't have this. He doesn't have a big national profile. I don't see people talk about him much. I don't know how teams view him, but I mean, he studies like crazy. He's been mostly healthy until this point, with this quad injury. Wouldn't think it's a long-term thing or anything. He's young, he's physical, he tackles, he's aggressive around support. He's definitely versatile coverage-wise, and if he can play like this in his zone scheme, when he's obviously good in press man as well. So there are layers to that, and you're interesting. It's a valuable position for sure.
The one thing that we do know about Carlton Davis is that he can stand up against top competition. I mean, Julio Jones twice a year, Michael Thomas twice a year. You look what he did to Devontae Adams, shutting him down to under 70 yards, which I think is shutting down Devontae Adams at this point in his career.
He was great against Devontae Adams. Yeah, when Adams' biggest catch, I think, came not against Davis, I believe.
So
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think he's proven it. But again, as John said, what does the league think about him? And that's something that I don't think that we really know or hear too much down here.
So I think that's a huge point. I also think research we've done looking at corners specifically is that man guys or guys with the ability to play press man coverage will get paid more. So all else equal, it's just a more valuable skill set because fewer guys are capable of doing that. Example from this past offseason, William Jackson had missed so much time. He is a talented guy. He can take on another team's number one, maybe not as effectively, but he had a strong market simply because teams think we can put this guy on an island if we absolutely have to.
Yeah, he got what? Was it 13.5?
13.5, which was the biggest deal at corner of the offseason. Not a huge deal. And part of it is because the drop, also just because he's not quite as talented. He's also was 29 years old when he signed that, whereas I want to say Carlton's will be 26 this offseason. But regardless, teams probably think Shaq Griffin is a better player than Will Jackson is, but they don't think Shaq Griffin can actually line up one-on-one with the team's number one guy.
Interesting stuff. I love that. It's a good perspective there on Carlton Davis. Okay. So we know what the market could look like for Carlton Davis. Get yourselves ready. Let's talk about Ryan Jensen now. Trickier. Well, maybe not trickier, but he's 30. He'll be 31 next year. His style of play is extremely physical. And so you always worry about lineman bodies at that point. This is how I view the Ryan Jensen situation. And Brad, you tell me if I'm totally off or not what I'm thinking. If I'm him, I'm wondering, do I have 2 more years left in me and a winning team, and I want to go for a 2-year deal at basically the same rate I'm at now? They're around the same rate I would guess that he's at now, since he's playing at such a high level, and probably finish this thing off and retire when I'm 33, going to be 33 that offseason of when I retire. And that's kind of how I see it. Or am I looking to cash out big, 4-year deal, Maybe the fourth year is not as heavy with guarantees and teams can get out of it easier. But that probably could be on the table for him if he goes out to the market. I'm guessing one or two teams that have one of these bad teams with tons of cap space and horrible offensive line needs a culture change guy, kind of like the Bucs a couple years ago, say like, hey, come in here, be our guy. We're going to smash. We're going to run the ball while our young quarterback develops. We know you love to destroy people. You'll come in here and be a part of a different type of offense, but one that allows you to just bash people for the last few years of your career. And then it's a 4-year deal. And then the Bucs might be less inclined to go that direction. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Ryan Jensen? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I think the analogy is last offseason with Corey Linsley, who was with the Green Bay Packers forever, got that offer, got the 4-year highest paid center in the NFL offer from the Chargers. And I think a kind of a perfect match would be, let's say you're the New York Jets. You're going to say, hey, Ryan Jensen, we love to run the ball. You can play forward and just maul people. We just traded for a right guard. We drafted a left tackle. We're really invested. We traded up and drafted a left guard in the top 15 picks. Come in here, be the veteran leader on this offensive line. Yes, I know it's the New York Jets, and you're choosing to leave Tampa Bay to go to New York, but I guess Laurent Duvernay-Tardif just chose to go from the Chiefs to the Jets. But long story short, that is the decision. He could either cash out, and I think he will, or he could go for that, like you said, finish out the career with still money that respects him and pays him near where he's worth. Working in the Bucs' favor, unlike cornerback, there are a billion free agent centers available this offseason. So they will have the leverage to say, like, look, we like you a ton. We want you to stay. But there are a lot of centers hitting the market. So that could help them as well.
And how old was Linsley?
He was, I think, 30, so a year younger, 29, 30 range. So, but similar, very similar.
So it might depend what Jensen wants. Does he want the term and probably more money over more years? Or does he thinking, I want to go out with a winner with Tom Brady and play for a couple more years? Because the Bucs offered a 4-year deal to Ryan Jensen. I'm just not sure. He's not missed time, but his body is, I don't know. It's just interesting given his place now.
100%. And the thing too there is it's a third contract. I mean, you already made him one of the highest paid centers in football when you paid him. So you might think like, look, we already gave you a phenomenal deal. Not that like you're going to leverage that to say take a softer deal, but in your mind, a lot of teams try to avoid that third contract because injury is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure, he's probably not getting the franchise tag, coming in at around $16 million next year. But you make interesting points, especially about the free agency having a lot of centers on the market, because I still feel like center is one of those positions in the league that there are very few good top centers. There's a bunch of guys that come in, but none of them are really, especially in the draft too, none of them are really like top tier centers. And Ryan Jensen is that. He's a top tier center. And to John's point, the 4-year contract would be there, but if the Bucs wanted to stay shorter, what is it going to take? He's making $10 million this year. Would a 2-year, $24 million deal work? You think for him? Is that what he's looking at? Maybe a slight raise, or are we talking he's getting $14 million per? Is it 12, 14? What's the market number looking like for a guy like Ryan Jensen?
Yeah, so I don't think you could pay him less than 10, but I think you could probably try to start at 10 and just say, look, you played well, you outperformed this contract, but now we're not paying for past performance. We're paying for who you're going to be going forward. But yes, then another team I think would come in and offer 12, 13 range, just kind of out of desperation. Like you said, as a leader, as a guy who, would eat glass if you asked him to. And I think a lot of teams in the NFL need a guy like that on their offensive line. So yeah, right around there, pay cut I don't see. But like you said, center is also very interesting where about 10 guys a year get paid. And then most teams will just take like undrafted free agents or the worst guard on the roster. Like it's funny how teams allocate resources. Some teams are unwilling to spend there. So maybe that helps the Bucs a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's going to be his situation will be because what is he thinking? That's the other part. Like, I don't have any idea. Like some of these guys I know, they love Tampa. I don't know with Ryan Jensen, like Ali Marpet said the other day. I don't think most of us want to know what Ryan Jensen's thinking on the regular basis. So we don't know what to expect from Ryan Jensen this offseason.
The biggest thing, too, is how does the season end up for some of these older players? The younger players, whatever. They're going to go out. They're going to try to make their money, whether it's here, whether it's someone else. With the older players like a Ryan Jensen, it's, what is their mindset? Exactly like John said. What are they thinking? Are they thinking, hey, we don't want to go start all over with a young quarterback and having to learn the protections and how to snap the ball and everything, so it's really difficult to kind of project some of these older guys out, especially the ones coming up next in our in the next list of grouping
Yeah.
of guys.
For sure. We're going to get to the V word here, the void. We're going to talk about those void years in a second. But first, I gotta let people know about our friends at Underdog Fantasy, because right now there's an awesome opportunity going on at UnderdogFantasy.com. By using the promo code Pewter, if you're a new user and you sign up, they are going to do a deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100 in there to use, they are going to give you $100 to use. There's all kinds of stuff you can get into. You can get into, they have a bunch of tournaments up on the main page. Doesn't matter if it's NFL or if you like are into other sports. I'm a big NBA guy. So, I've been doing the player prop bets, the pick'ems over an NBA, over the NBA section that their site that they have. I love them. And you can do them for NFL games too. I won money on Chris Godwin like every week, I think, betting over at Underdog Fantasy. So go over to Underdog Fantasy, put down some money there, but whatever you deposit, they are going to match it. So if you put in 100, you put in 50, whatever it is, they'll match it and they'll go back to you. So you'll get double the amount there, and you'll be able to use that to get yourself some cheese right now. So make sure you go over to UnderdogFantasy.com, use that promo code Pewter, and make that available to yourself. Okay, Brad, let's talk about void years. We started talking about with Jensen. He could be a guy that's a possibility. And so as we broach the subject of void years, as we start looking at some more of these, what could be short-term deals if they want to bring back some vets, some older vets on the roster. What's the situation with that right now in Tampa Bay with void years, and how likely do you think it is to be used across a large number of players? Certainly we know Chris Godwin, Carlton Davis, it's possible, but those could be guys that they're looking to do, they're younger players. They're looking for their first big contract. They're looking to do more normal contracts with those guys. But some of the older guys who they might want to bring back for 1 or 2 years or 3, they might be looking at void years as an option for them.
100%. I think it will apply more to the, the Gronkowskis, the maybe Ndamukong Suh, Ryan Jensen, potentially those guys, where the target year, again, the target is 2023. It's already been set up that way, to where the whole point of this is essentially just to help you in the short term, and then we'll get a flood of cap hitting in 2023. So I think that will happen again. I think we will see it. But like you said, I think Godwin and Davis potentially would sign for 4 or 5 years, so you wouldn't need them. But yep, for the older guys, they're definitely not going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And so you've got a 3 on the defensive line. Jason Pierre-Paul, going to be 33 years old, I believe, this offseason. Obviously, the body is starting to break down a little bit. He's hardly ever practices the last 2 years. He's on the injury report all the time. He's playing with a club on his hand. He's got a shoulder issue. He's being really tough about it, but it's easy to tell when he talks about it, how much pain he's in playing it on a regular basis. Has maintained that he not want to, at least last time we got him to talk about it, he is no plans of retiring anytime soon. Pain is doesn't matter to Jason Pierre-Paul. It's like very relative to him. He does not he is one of the 1%, even in the NFL. I think he's a unique dude, and that I don't think that would stop him from playing really at any point. Like, he just loves football that much. Obviously, there's the value of the locker room leader, the vocal guy, all of those things. The level of play, it's dropped off this year. Yeah, he's been hurt so much, it's hard to know what is the cause of what at this point. But also, you can probably bet on him being hurt, even if he plays through it in the future, given how the last few years and even his Bucs tenure's gone. He's played through a lot of injuries, but he's been injured pretty much the whole time he's been in Tampa Bay, one way or the other. So what do you envision happening with Jason Pierre-Paul this offseason? Then we'll look at Ndamukong Suh and Will Golston, or you can feel free to throw the thoughts in on those guys in the conversation as well.
Yeah, with JPP at edge, it's again not a super strong group, and so it's going to be kind of a similar decision for him, to where, and for him, I would say even more so maybe than Jensen. I think he might lean towards, I just want to win Super Bowls and just compete and contend. He's made a good amount of money so far in his career, but yeah, I think there will be a team that says that is willing to offer him a good bit more than Tampa will. I mean, obviously Joe Tryon, not to say the entire point of the pick, but obviously a big part of that pick is the succession plan beyond JPP. And so, they want him on the field, as they should. He's a talented young player. So he's one where it's going to be a decision between, some team will probably offer him, because if you look at the list of available guys, it's not strong. Him and Chandler Jones, again, older guys, not really kind of young studs coming up. Someone could offer him like a 2-year, $25 million, where I think the Bucs will probably go the Ndamukong Suh route. And so we'll kind of transition to that. But, they'll offer the 1-year, $8 million type of thing. Give him the chance to, still make good money, but, contend. And I think that'll be the situation there. With Suh and Golston, the interior defensive line class is probably the worst of all positions in the NFL. So,
wow.
Yeah. So that's another interesting one too. Like there is, our top guy is Calais Campbell, who is 36 years old. Akeem Hicks, I think, is our third ranked guy, like who's going to be 33 or 34.
And his body's falling apart too.
It is. Yeah. It's been unfortunate. Also, he's a guy where, like you said with JPP, like when he does play, you can tell he's probably playing through something because he just doesn't look the same. And he's been in my opinion, again, a Bears fan, but super underrated the last couple of years. And now you're kind of seeing it with him. But those are the top guys. And so that'll be interesting to see. I think they should stick around. I mean, I don't think that teams are going to kind of break the bank there. They're probably just going to pass on interior defenders for this offseason.
Right. There's also that caveat that Sue could very well retire at this point. I mean, he and McClendon are the oldest two defensive tackles in the league, unless you count Campbell, as a defensive tackle too. And he's probably the only guy that's older than them playing right now. He's still balling out, by the way. He might be one of those guys that defies it and has like an Andrew Whitworth like run to his 40s. He has that kind of future at him. Sue is already, I mean, he is a good solid player who keeps himself in unbelievable shape and still has never missed a game due to injury in his entire career, which is unbelievable. So there would still be a market for him. I think it would be 1 year stuff, probably, like I said, 35 years old, and he's just not a pass rusher anymore. He's not really impactful in that way very much. And so, he is going to bring something to the team for sure. The Bucs, I'm sure, would love him back, but it can't be what's 9. Is he at 9 this year? 9 million?
Right. 8 or 9, which I agree. They wouldn't offer that this time around.
What would it be, do you think? Half of that? I mean,
like
6 sacks last year. Yeah. Half of that.
And he might be a guy where, like Jarrell, I was told this offseason Jarrell Casey was getting offers to play, but just not to where he was willing to play for. So there might even be a question of like, where is the limit with Ndamukong Suh, where he's willing to put his body through all the wear and tear.
I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I don't think he'll play anywhere else, but I don't know if he'd come back to the Bucs for that little too. And that's what they've got to do. They've got to put their foot down there, because the 6 sacks, honestly, it might have made things tough. They were a lot of coverage sacks. He's not a pass rusher, but last year he still got 6 sacks, and that matters in the negotiation table, whether it's or not. And so that might have kind of backfired on them a little bit. And Golston, you and I talked about this a little bit, Brad, probably the most underrated player in the Bucs, maybe defense, maybe really important to them. Probably not going to generate a lot of buzz around the league. Yeah, there's just not a ton of production there or a big profile. He's going to be 31, I believe, before next season starts. I think that's right. So, he's gotten better every year of his career, but I still don't know if he's good enough to like demand a huge contract. He's always played in Tampa. He and David are like the old heads, the longest tenured guys. I just feel like he finishes it out in Tampa. It'd be weird to see him somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with you there. This is why I love having conversations with people like yourself, because I missed on Will Golston last offseason and didn't really know like what he brought to the table. He's an important player. He makes an impact on the defensive line. Like you said, I almost feel like he looked good this year as well. But I mean, I think the story's out on him to where like you don't really like boost your pay at this point. You essentially can keep it where it is, which is a success. Which for him is like I think $5.5 million. I think that's probably even too much. Maybe they offer 3.5, 4, just because they care about him and in the locker room and stuff like that. But yeah, he won't have much of a market.
Yeah, so you're thinking more 3 for 12, something like that, around there? Because I was looking at like 3-18 or something like that. So
I think you could maybe pull off a 3 for 12. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I think that would make sense to be, just because pass rush everybody's paying for. They feel like they can find run defenders all over the place. Teams are undrafted guys are playing. I just wonder if that and he is, to be honest, on the Bucs, he's probably the second best interior pass rusher. Like they just have a bunch of run stuffers. And I think having him though is so important to Tampa Bay, because if Sue moves on, McClendon probably retires after this year. Raheem Nunez-Roches will be around, but he's not an every down starter. Everybody knows that. And so I think Golston becomes kind of an important player to keep around. I think you're right that they will do that. Okay, go ahead, JC.
I just want to ask, just jumping the gun a year here then too. You got Vita Vea coming up. Is that somewhere where you're like, hey, we're just going to wait till 2023 once the cap jumps up and address you then, once your rookie deal is up? Or is there someone that, because obviously you're going to need to open up cap space, and you can only go to Ali Marpet and Mike Evans and these guys so many times before they have no more cap left to push, right? So
right.
Is it a case where Vita Vea making, I think, $8 million next year in the 5th year of his option, $7 million, somewhere around there? Is that somewhere where they look at him as possibly an extension to kind of free up some of that money and get in early before the big cap jump spikes up next in 2023, where people will pay money willy-nilly to everybody?
110%. And I think they would be very, very smart, not only because the market will jump, but also, I mean, look, you have Quinnen Williams, you have Derek Brown, you have all these guys coming from the drafts after him. Kenny Clark has a really strong deal. I would consider him the top contract at nose tackle, or whatever you want to call it, at $17.5 million per year, which is a lot of money. Vega's probably looking, I know maybe you guys, maybe 20 million or close to 20 million per year himself. But you get that deal done. I know you get that deal done. And I'm telling you, by 2025, there will be interior guys making 30 million a year, and you'll feel good about it. So,
and his bump wouldn't come until they could structure. I mean, structure plus he has the year left, so they could set it up.
They probably clear cap space with the extension.
Yeah, right. Good point. Yeah, they needed. You're right. That'll probably be something they look at doing because they want him around. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the Vea because everybody loves him and I love him too. But it comes to a point that 20 million a year for a guy who just doesn't get that many, like he doesn't get that many sacks. He's a good pass rusher, for what he is, but he doesn't get off blocks and finish very often. And there just needs to be, I don't know that he ever is going to. And so I, again, love the player, but the conversation shifts from whether you like the player to value, and it becomes really interesting. Even Kenny Clark, who I think is probably a little bit of a better pass rusher than Vita Vea. I don't know if anybody is as good a run defender as Vita Vea for what he does. You can argue how valuable that is. We saw that conversation happen with Brandon Williams for years with Baltimore. Obviously, Vea is a better pass rusher than Brandon Williams was, but there does come to the value point of the conversation with Vea. We'll have that conversation down the road, though. We'll have you back on to have that conversation right down the road.
See how it would play out cap-wise.
Yeah, that's a good thought, JC, and a good question because I hadn't thought about that. Like, there are things that they can do now with current players. And we're not at that point with Devin White, though, right? Like, I know we're not 2.5 years in. We got to see how year 3 finishes. You get year 4. It feels early for that.
Is there any way? I know they don't need to do it right now, but Ryan Jensen, we talked about, obviously last year of his deal. I'm not sure if the window has passed where they can extend and open up cap space, but is that something? I mean, I thought they would have done that this past offseason if they wanted to keep him around. Was extend him like they did Donovan Smith and use those void years to open up cap space, but they didn't. And then instead of doing it with him again in the offseason, right in the summer, they went to Mike Evans and gave Mike Evans that upload. And then they went to Ali Marpet and still didn't go to Jensen. Is that telling when you look at like these contract situations with a player that, hey, if they're going to these other guys instead of coming to you and extending you, just kind of fill me in there on that mindset?
It's totally a signal, and that's a good thing for you to notice. 100%. I mean, they're going to be more willing to do it with guys that they know they want to have around for the next several years. One example this offseason was the Seattle Seahawks were in a bit of a cap crunch, and they went to every single person on the roster besides Russell Wilson. And I said, look, you can take all the rumors that you want. This alone convinces me that they're at least open to the idea of moving on from Russell Wilson at some point, because I'm not kidding. They literally restructured every single contract besides his, whereas they could have cleared the same amount of room by just doing his and doing nobody else's. And so, it's always a signal. Nothing is by accident. But also to your point, if they wanted to extend him like mid-season, they could. So they could go to him now and work out a deal and extend him. And as long as they do it before the season ends, they can actually put some money in this year if they wanted to. But yeah, so it is fluid, but yes, it's not by accident for sure.
You're talking about Jensen there? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. I was making sure. Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. The whole thing's fascinating. I don't know that they want to pay multiple guys on the offensive line in the, what would it be? In the 8-figure range. I don't know if they want to do that on the offensive line yet. And that's, they draft Hainsey, you have Stinney there. Maybe they view those guys replacements. Then obviously you draft other people or sign cheap free agents. Brady makes it work with the offensive line. That's something that has to be considered too. If they think he has a couple more years in this, is going to be a big part of probably all the rest of what we talk about here with free agents. We're going to talk about Fournette, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski. It's a big part of it, right? Like if Brady is on pace to break almost every single season passing record. I know that sounds ridiculous, and he doesn't even really need the extra game to break all of them either. He's going to have the extra game, which helps, but he's flirting with them anyway without the extra game. Even if he declines, we're still talking about a guy who's probably a better chance of winning you a Super Bowl, making a playoff run and being successful as a franchise than most quarterbacks around the league. Like he has room to decline and still be a top 10 quarterback. Is he going to fall off a cliff and be a bottom 10 quarterback? I don't know if we'll ever see that. I just don't know if Brady wants to keep playing. Is he going to be looking in the mirror and say, I'm actually bad, like I should stop playing? I think he would if that ever came. I don't know if that point's going to come. So I say all that just to say I think there's a conversation here with players to be like, I think Brady might come back for another year. And he could be, if he finishes this year and wins MVP, Brad, which is very much on the table. Like I said, I know people are just not really talking about Brady's an MVP right now because it's Brady and they just don't want to talk about him anymore. But he leads the league in PFF's highest graded quarterback by a mile. And he leads the league in pretty much every single category at the position that will win MVP. If he wins MVP, do you go to the table and start talking about another year with Brady this offseason? Because I know he's old, but he's the MVP.
I mean, the thing there is like, yes, why not? I mean, you just let him play it out. I'm also with you where I think, and maybe I'm wrong because he's so hyper competitive, but like were the Rivers or a Manning or a Breeze where like they needed to be taken out to pasture like 2 years before they actually hung him up.
They were cooked.
I don't think he would do that. I think he, like you said, he'd be in practice. He'd miss on a couple throws and be like, "Oh, I can't do that anymore. I'm done. Like I'm not going to make a fool of myself." And we're not there yet. So yeah, I would pay the guy until he wants to stop playing.
That's the thing. Like no one's ever going to fault you. Like it's Brady. Like you went in on him. Right. You
played 20-something years. But it's funny you mentioned the offensive line and how quickly Brady gets it out. And is it that important to have every single one of your guys a top paid offensive lineman? And we've done a lot of talk about Jensen, but they also got Kappa coming up as an unrestricted free agent as well. And obviously there was no reason on your last year of your rookie deal. Don't touch that contract. You let that run out. But is there what's his market looking like? As a guy who has steadily progressed last year, can't forget he was in the top, led the way in fan voting in the Pro Bowl up until the end. But is this a guy who they can spend feasible dollars on to try to keep him, or is he one of these casualties of, hey, we can't pay everybody on the offensive line? Is it Jensen or Kappa? Is it one or the other? And if it is, what do you think the best route to take, especially with a guy like Robert Hainsey, who's been practicing at center all year long, and again, an abundant class of centers in this free agent market?
But didn't play center before, worth mentioning with Hainsey. He would be totally new to it. So
I thought he was practicing at right guard. So that's actually
he's played at both, but a lot of it was at center, just so he learns to snap because they don't even have another snapper. Marpet's the backup center right now.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, I think so. Again, beneficial for the Bucs. There's a lot of free agent guards this offseason as well. So they should have leverage where Kappa, if he wants some big deal, they don't have to give it to him. I do think that's the calculation you make. I think you say, look, Donovan Smith has a good deal. Eli Marpet is one of the higher paid guards. We know Tristan's coming soon, and we got to get ready for that. I think it's funny because I think right guard, obviously across the league, is more valued, paid higher than center. But I think with a Brady, you want a guy that he trusts, that he, get him the ball. There's no communication issues there. There's no issues of protections, all of that. For them, I almost would be, I think it's an either or. And I don't know, if I was in charge, I would say, let's say you had $10 million available. I would be fine saying, all right, put 7 of that towards center and 3 of that towards the right guard. That would be my approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because but I agree with you completely. I mean, Jensen is just way more important. I know you could probably save money if you let him go and just sign Kappa and made it that simple, 1-for-1. But Jensen's just way more important and way better player, frankly, than Alex Kappa is. Kappa's a good, solid player. They've done a great job. Exactly what you got to do. Get a mid-rounder to play at that kind of a level. Use his rookie contract up. Use him as a starter. You get that level of play out of him. Great job. Exactly what you should do. Let him go somewhere else. Somebody else pays him. What do you think for him? 7, 8? What do you think?
Something like that. Yeah. Okay. Something like that. Maybe even less because the 20 guys. Yeah.
Okay. All right, interesting. Don't use the tag. No.
No.
Emily says.
I said he's about half the tag. Half the tag.
Yeah,
coming at 16. About half the tag makes sense for Kappa. I think
Emily says you have to keep Jensen. He knows jiu-jitsu.
And he smokes some mean brisket.
That's true. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think it is easier to replace a guard than a good center. Good point here by 179 CPV. Relationship between the center and the quarterback is important. Absolutely. Kappa going to get paid, just not us. Good point, John. I agree. Yeah. Somebody will pay him. There's lots of teams that need a starter on the offensive line. He's a good one, culture guy, about as tough as anybody in the league. But at the end of the day, you got to prioritize where that money's going. You got to prioritize where your time's going too. And your time could be well spent over at Spotify Green Room. If you download it on the App Store and get it on Google Play, on here, you could talk about music, sports, and culture live. you can grab the mic when you step into these chat rooms and you can take control of the conversation, voice your opinion on these topics. You can talk football with us too. If you follow Pewter Report on there, we'll send you the notifications for when we go live, send you an invitation over in Spotify Green Room, and you can jump into the conversations with us and talk a little Bucs. We talk a lot of draft on there when that time of the year comes. And we'll obviously talk a lot of contracts this offseason.
Oh, yeah.
So make sure you're following Pewter Report on there so you can catch up with everything that we're doing. And I would be remiss if I didn't say you could also talk about golf on there. And of course, you can definitely talk about golf here with us, and especially with our friends over at livinggolflife.com. You can follow them on Instagram and see all the wonderful products that they're coming out with at livinggolflife.com. But most notably, the polos are extremely comfortable and extremely sweet looking. Also, the hat, Living Golf Life hat, top one hat for me in my closet. I love that hat. And I think you could check that out and a lot of other hats that they have coming over at livinggolflife.com or following them on Instagram. So get yourself ready to get out on the course and get yourself some Living Golf Life apparel. Also, great time to ask for it with the holidays coming up around the corner.
Sure.
All right, Brad, we've moved through a lot of these players. Now we're going to talk about a position that I know you and your colleagues at PFF do not care about at all. Just kidding. Running backs. Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, Giovanni Bernard, all set to be free agents. Should the Bucs, JC posited this on yesterday's podcast, should the Bucs not re-sign any of them and run exclusively 5 wide receiver sets next season?
I didn't say that. I didn't say
this was JC's recommendation. He said no running backs ever.
I just don't think. Obviously, Rojo's probably the odd man out. Giovanni Bernard, what he's giving you is great, but getting older, and then Leonard Fournette, I think
Rojo's just out. We know Rojo's out. We all know that at this point.
Yeah. I didn't think he was going to get traded, but I think just the fact his name was even kind of getting circulated in those trades probably says something. No, the funny thing also you give me credit for being mostly right, so I'll raise my hand. I was wrong, and they brought Lombardi Lenny back. I think that was the one I was wrong about.
That's right.
Most of us
we didn't think his market would be that abysmal. I think it was the Patriots, the Seahawks, and the Bucs. Those were the three. And
right.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. He is our number one running back. Or it's him and Chase Edmonds. And after that, it's ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
I think teams will still view him as, he's a former top 5 pick and he's revitalized his career. And it's still not super pretty that how he catches the ball, but I mean, he has like 30 receptions on the year. So he at least can do it. He, I think, will finally get right. He'll finally, I think, get that deal. He'll get the, 3-year, $30 million or something. And Tampa will not be in that market.
Oh, you think he'll get up to 10 a year?
It could be less. It definitely could be less.
Oh, yeah.
It could be, a 3-year 20 or something like that. But it's, long story short, it's not, like you said, it's not going to be a 1 year, $3.5 million. And I think he was willing to do it last time. Say, look, I love where I'm at. I've made some good money and I'll get more exposure. But now I think his calculus, which it should be, is I got to cash out. I got to get the one big deal. And then maybe I'll get cut in a year and I'll come right back. But
right. I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. No, I think you're spot on. Lenny's, he's got to look at it that way. Anything over 6 is, to me, the Bucs are out on. I don't see them being in on
5.
And maybe at 6 they're in. I don't even know if they're in at 6. I mean, that position, Bruce Arians' offense, it clearly just doesn't matter as much as other positions. He knows that. I think the front office knows it. They can plug in some guys there. There's lots of players available at that position. And one guy they can bring back if they let Rojo and Lenny walk is Giovanni Bernard, right? Pretty cheap, older running back, but can passing downs, can handle things. That's at least a big role. So if you draft somebody and it takes time to learn the pass game for running backs, Bruce Arians has said that a bunch, takes time to learn third downs and things like that. It takes time to learn pass protection, especially at the NFL level for backs out of college most of the time. Bruce Arians has been open, though, that those are the things he really values at the position. Well, you don't want to let Bernard go in that situation, especially when he's so cheap, right?
Totally. And yeah, there won't be a huge market. And he's a guy, too. He spent his whole career in Cincinnati. Yeah. I'm sure he's having the best of times.
Yeah. He'll probably get more opportunity running the ball next year, too, if
John,
those guys aren't around, even one of them. So
you just keep ignoring a guy like Keyshawn Vaughn. Why you just keep ignoring the guy? He's got plenty.
He's not a free agent.
Talk him up. Let's talk him up.
No, he's got plenty of potential, I think. But just a real quick on the running back situation. You mentioned Chase Edmonds and Leonard Fournette, probably the top 2 guys there. Who else is underneath there? Who's a good pure run? If you bring back Giovanni Bernard, who's your pass catching back, who's a guy who can run between the tackles, run hard, and who's not going to break the bank for the Bucs? Probably around $4 or $5 million.
I would say a guy like a James Conner, have a bit of a revitalized career in Arizona, just vulturing touchdowns left, right, and center. But he's looked pretty well running between the tackles, like you said. He's a perfect, like the opposite of what Gio Bernard brings to the table. And he would not be super expensive because he's somewhat limited physically.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good option. I obviously watched him in Pittsburgh for years. Body, I don't know what his body has left in it. That's the only thing.
Right.
He's hurt all the time, and the Bucs definitely look at that, but it would be very cheap, and he can catch and he does pass protect. He's pretty good pass protecting back, and he'll run really hard too. Great character guy, so definitely would fit in a lot of ways with what they want in the locker room.
Sign him now.
Yeah, good name to have in the quiver. We'll see how he finishes the season out health wise. I don't even know how he's holding up now, but let's look at the tight end position. This gets tricky with Rob Gronkowski hurt right now. Bruce Arians had some encouraging things to say about him on Bucs Total Access in terms of the fact that he thinks he'll be back for the Washington game. He's hopeful. Maybe it's not the long-term thing, but you hear back spasms for a player that's older, that just had a rib injury. Now it's his back. And you start to wonder about the trickle effect of
surgeries too.
Yeah. He's had a lot of stuff done. And so you just wonder, even in his mind, like he's gone through he broke 4 ribs. He had a punctured or pinched lung or whatever it ended up being technically. I don't think it was ever life-threatening for him or anything, but you wonder, does that go through his mind? Does he decide to hang it up? And if he doesn't, what's it take to get him back in Tampa? It was off to a great start this year. We'll see. I guess we really got to see how the rest of the year goes, I'm sure, with him.
Yeah, but I do think it's relevant that he said I think it was last offseason, how his biggest issue and part of the reason he retired was that he tried to come back from injuries too quickly and then he would re-injure. And yeah, I guess he did come back and have the back spasms, but it did sound like if he wanted to, he could have come back earlier and kind of forced the issue and played at less than 100%. So I think it'll be kind of similar situation where he says, look, I'm happy to come back. Like you said, he was very productive, but again, being honest, being like, look, if I get hurt, I'm not going to like force the issue. If, if it's a 3-week injury, I might take 5 weeks and you have to be okay with that. And of course he was the opposite of that for the beginning of his career. And that's kind of how those guys are built. But that I think would be the calculus. And for that reason, I think his market would come down a little bit to where it was this offseason, where it's more of we want you here. You can be super productive, but you're no longer going to be like a guarantee to be playing every week and willing to like go to extreme ends to be on the football field.
Yeah. And he's only willing to sign 1-year deals too, which is a part of it. Go ahead, JC.
And I think too, with Gronk he was very smart. He had that personality that he came out into the league with, and he did not spend $1 of any of his contract money, lived off just endorsements. And if you look what coming to Tampa has done for him, I can't turn on the TV without seeing a Gronk in a commercial, whether it's USAA or something else, T-Mobile, whatever he's doing, he's everywhere. So he's continuing to make that money. The question is, obviously, same thing with Ndamukong Suh, is what does it cost me to suit up? Because I think he loves the game of football. I think he loves playing here in Tampa, especially with Tom. And injuries be damned. What is the number? What is that number to get him to lace up his cleats and further risk his body? Because again, multiple back injuries, surgeries stemming all the way from college. So, I mean, does this guy want to have a quality of life? We know the bang bang type of player he is. Turn on that Bills play where he carried 4 defenders to the end zone with him. So, like, what's the number? What is he's making 10 this year, I believe. What's the number next year to get him back? Given that, hey, the injury situation and everything else.
Here's a cop-out answer for you as well. The Bucs will be competing. The Bucs will be competing on that contract, not with 31 other teams. I think the Bucs will be competing in his negotiations with NBC, Fox, and ABC. And I think that they will. That those guys now make around $1 million per year. He already did it for a little bit when he was retired. I think, like you said, he's in a million commercials. Everyone knows him and wants to hear him talk and all that. So that's another where, like Sue, where it's like they could offer him 5, but he might say, I can make more than that and not put my body through hell.
Yeah.
But I think he loves football. I think 1 year, $5 million. I think he'd probably do it.
Interesting. That would be a win for the Bucs if they get him 1 year, $5 million. You never know. I just don't know. I don't know what he's going to be, because his health is going to play more to it and how good he feels like the team is and how much Brady talks him into coming back. I think is going to play more into it than anything. Either way, tight end's a position they got to start looking at the future at, because OJ Howard, they picked up the 5th year. He's playing now, but he hasn't even fully come back from the Achilles. He's fine. He looks fine. I wonder if another offense is just going to be better for him. Like Bucs ask a lot of their tight ends as blockers. He's just not proven to be that great of a blocker. He's okay, but he's not great at it. And they just ask a lot from that position in terms of blocking, especially at tough assignments. Got to handle DNs a lot. A lot of teams would look at him and just say, hey, flex out here. I mean, Miami would just be like, you're never play in line. Like, we don't, there's some teams like that would just allow him to be a vertical threat. And I wonder if he could thrive more in that role for another team.
I think so. Yeah, his market's going to be fascinating because, like you said, he's put some good plays on tape this year. But I agree that I don't know if his usage. I mean, Bruce Arians, like, he kind of was maybe the biggest victim of that change in the coaching staff because Arians just doesn't really use guys in the way you figured OJ Howard could best be used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird because it's vertical offense, and Gronk was the best vertical tight end statistically in the league last year. And OJ had his moments too last year, but this year it has been almost, with 3 receivers that know the offense, they have just let those guys just reign vertically, and OJ has not done much down the field this season. Maybe that changes as he gets healthier. That could be a part of it too. Bruce said he has not been at full speed yet. He's not have his speed back from before his Achilles. To his credit, he has worked hard to come back from that, and he has gotten better as a blocker from where he was last year. He's gotten better every week in everything since he's been back. Really, I think he's been more impressive on tape. He is kind of the profile and the athleticism and the shortage at the position in the NFL. Like, that is just a position that pretty much sucks across the league against the injury history and the disappointment and the fact that there has not been the production, especially the last 2 years, probably, when by the time he gets free agency, that you'd like to see from him for sure.
And I mean, he's making $6.5 million this year, and on the 5th-year option, six and a half.
Yep.
I mean, that's a lot. I don't know if he sniffs that in the open market next season, but because of what you just said, the lack of tight ends out there and quality tight ends, and still the potential. You've seen the keys to open up for the Ferrari. You've seen it go rev its engine. You haven't seen it really take off. And I think teams will be interested in that and saying, hey, maybe our system, like you said, we can get this guy going and he can run the 40-yard dash and in the minute mile, whatever it is, Fast and Furious style. But if he's not back, Cam Brate is on this, year to year team option basis.
I got to ask you about Cam Brate, Brad. Like, is this guy going to be the biggest? Signed a 6-year deal, remember,
for 48, I think. Yeah,
I think his production has declined every year, and I know they've restructured it a few times, but he might ride this thing out, and it looks good for him to not get cut. He didn't have anything guaranteed. I think the last 3 or 4 years of his deal, against all odds, it looks like he might actually get this full contract, despite
which never happens. Like the amount of 6-year contracts that are seen to the end, which he did take a small pay cut, but still, it's like 2%. Like, it does not happen. It is pretty funny, his situation. The last time I was on 2, we thought he would be back, but I actually think we did say he would have to take a pay cut to stay. So
and he did,
a little notch in the cap there. But it's pretty funny. I mean, he's just having a good time along for the ride.
It's unbelievable.
What does that tight end look like? That tight end class look like this year? Because if Gronk retires or goes to NBC, ABC, whatever, someone else pays OJ. I mean, what are you looking at? I mean, the draft is always a crapshoot, as we know.
More good news. In my opinion, it is the strongest tight end class in the history of free agency in the NFL, which isn't saying a lot because, like you said, tight end, there's not 32 tight ends to even go around in this league. But yeah, there are a ton of very talented guys. It's a lot of guys that are projections like OJ Howard. I mean, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, exact same, first round guys on the 5th-year option. But also Dalton Schultz is emerging in Dallas. He's a free agent. They already paid Blake Jarwin, so they probably can't keep him around as well. Dallas Goedert, maybe, he comes available. There are a ton of tight end options, which, that helps.
Yeah, that does. It's interesting. All right, we got to close it out here quickly we have 2 more questions for you, Brad. But first, got to shout out our friends over at Pin Chasers. You can join the Pewter Report Bowling League by emailing Matt Matera, matt@pewterreport.com. Email him. Let him know you'd like to be a part of what's going on at Pin Chasers. You can see the locations there on your screen: East Pasco, Midtown, Veterans, Tampa. Listen, I'm telling you right now, this place is awesome. And Wednesday, 6:30 p.m., is the next time that the bowling league meets. You can show up there, bring some friends, jump in, be a part of it, get some of this awesome food. And I don't know if this is going to be positive or negative, but I believe myself and my wife, Britt, will be there. So we'd love to meet as many of you as possible that listen to this show all the time, watch this show all the time, and live in the area. We'd love to meet with y'all and talk some Bucs with y'all, hang out, bowl, have some food with y'all, some drinks with y'all. We'd love that. So Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. next week. Make sure you email Matt Matera at matt@pewterreport.com is the email there. But they've also got all-you-can-eat pizza nights, all kinds of stuff. Check out pinchasers.net. They've just got great experience. If you got kids, especially, you got the family, bring them down there on the weekend. Great opportunity to have some fun bowling, get some food, get some drinks. Awesome time at Pinchasers. Long time sponsors of the Pewter Report podcast. All right, Brad, Antonio Brown. This might be one of the hardest for you. In my mind, it is. Maybe you'll tell me something totally different. I just feel like his situation is so difficult because you do have the off the field stuff, but that's been a while now. Maybe he's turned over a new leaf. Is it just Tampa Bay? We don't know. Is it Tom Brady? We don't know. Last year, there didn't seem to be a huge market for him. He comes back pretty cheap to the Bucs. He's going to be 34 years old before next season starts. Wide receivers that age, just especially with the market dropping, they don't tend to get paid. But when Antonio Brown's been healthy this season, I mean, he's been unbelievable. Like, he's a true number one wide receiver still, he looks like. He could defy, he could go longer than Fitzgerald in terms of into his career and still being productive. But Fitzgerald he wasn't a number one option, into his 30s for sure, where AP, it looks like he looked like legitimately the number one option when he's been healthy. The other part is health, though. There hasn't been a serious injury, but there's been nagging injuries, the COVID, then he's had an ankle sprain. I don't know how much teams get worried about those things because he's been a guy that's pretty much been healthy throughout his career. He's a workout, crazy person. He does all these workouts and stays in good shape. What in the world happens with AB this offseason at 34 years old?
Yeah, it's remarkable. Just like Tom Brady, I guess. I mean, he's still, like you said, he looks like one of the best wide receivers in all of football when he's healthy, which is just insane. But yeah, I think the way you look at it is now health is also a question mark. In addition to, like you said, there's nothing, I guess, pending right now, but it's kind of potentially always something that's in the back of your mind. Look, we know for a fact that other teams were interested this past offseason. I can tell you other teams were having conversations with Antonio Brown's people and were exploring, bringing him aboard. So it's not a market of one team. But I still think, end of the day, just like last offseason, the Bucs will make a good enough offer where it's worth it to him to just stay and play with Tom and chase rings and build up his cachet and just like Gronk and everything. Not that he's in commercials and all that, but I think his image is kind of, taken a positive turn. So I think that'll be the situation again, and it'll be one of the best value contracts in all of football once more.
So 5 wide receivers. We're running it.
There we go. It's coming back. All right, last guy we got to ask you about, Brad, is Jordan Whitehead. He's strong safety stocks today. And not even really on the national radar. JC's pretty high on him. I like him a lot as well. I think he played well. He plays well in a specific role, though. They don't ask him to be a single high free safety, ball roaming guy, and do that kind of stuff where he's ball hawking and things like that. They also don't ask him to step down and play in man coverage a ton. He is kind of in the box safety. He'll rotate and play in their 2 high coverages. They shelter his role. They've used him other ways, and they found that he got exposed in other ways earlier in his career. Last 2 years has been perfect. He's a terrific run defender. He's usually a very good tackler. He has some opportunities. He's very smart. He's very physical. So what's the situation look like for a guy like that at safety who isn't – safety is kind of like, right, there's all these different molds. It's hard to tell the market for safety under that large umbrella because it's all different. So what does it look like for Jordan Whitehead?
Yeah, I also think the NFL told us, obviously Jamal Adams did get his big deal, but that is part because he got traded for 2 first-round picks. So there's no choice there. The NFL told us what they think of safeties last offseason, in my opinion, even beyond the cap and all that. And look, it's something that me at PFF and other people kind of had to check ourselves and say, clearly we're not seeing something that teams are seeing at the safety spot because they do not want to pay these guys, even off-ball linebackers. We saw their market explode with Fred Warner and Darius Leonard and just not the same thing at safety. So, I like Mike Edwards. Obviously, you have some options there, but Whitehead is a fun player. He is a really good player. Not only tough, played through the injury, last year in the postseason as well. But yeah, it's kind of like a Von Bellish market, not great comparison, but down in the box is where he excels. You want him playing the run. But like you said, there are things you're not going to ask him to do. I think he's a guy where a 3-year 18 is something that would probably get a deal done just because of his limitations. But he's a great player, and does fill a role very well.
Is that what Von Bell got? Because that's a great I think it's a spot-on comparison.
Oh, there you go. But right around there. Yeah.
He got it right there. Okay, yeah. I think that's a great comparison. That's pretty much similar to who he is, and that's probably how teams will view him, I think, around the league. They know kind of the limitations are there, but a dead-on starter, if you have the right system, the right idea for him, he's a dead-on starter. There's no way that guy's on your bench, I think. So interesting stuff. Yeah. last thing I want to ask is it possible? Like, can the Bucs bring back the majority of these guys, be under the cap, get things, not totally screw themselves for the future? Obviously, they'll present some challenges, but you mentioned the cap going up at a pretty high rate. Is that all still in the cards for the Bucs?
I think once again, just like last offseason, they can do pretty much, If they want to go extreme, they can,
Yeah, interesting. Wow, lots of flexibility there.
I got a quick question too. So last year, you look at all these holes that the Bucs had filled. They filled them with their own players. They brought everybody back. This year, there looks to be positions on this team: tight end, guard, running back, maybe wide receiver in that room. Maybe you look around the different spots. How much of a destination and how much do you think that players will say, okay, because last year there wasn't an opportunity. Now there is, that the Bucs can get some really quality veterans into this building and help them with this team. How likely is it that they'll be able to add some really good players for surprising dollar amounts when it comes down to it?
Great question. I think it will only elevate. I think players will look at it as look, this might be the last opportunity to ever play with Tom Brady, on a football field, period. So, and I also think there's a couple of good examples. Look about 2 wide receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster and Will Fuller. They signed 1-year flyers and both seasons. I mean, Juju for injury, he was playing all right. And Fuller just not really getting on the field. But those are 2 examples to where they're again not going to get a market. So maybe convince them, take another 1-year flyer. You'll get exposure. You'll get, good quarterback play, all of that. I think they will. That will be the market where they, like you said, if they lose guys, they're just going to bring in every veteran that they can convince, come in for a true last dance with Tom Brady.
Speaking of every veteran, I'd be remiss, and I know Scott would be upset if we didn't ask about number 11 on the playbook, number 1 in your hearts, Mr. Blaine Gabbert. Is there a possibility that they bring Blaine Gabbert to be the guy, even though they brought back Kyle Trask?
It might say some scary things about Kyle Trask, but yeah, I'm sure they can bring him back for the minimum, but that might be a bad thing based on what it implies.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that if you're looking around the league, you kind of see what the Patriots used to do, right? And bring those veterans in at the end of their rope for another one last run. And I think the Bucs have set themselves up in a position right now where they can actually do that. They can go out there and they can bring in some guys and make that push with these veteran free agents and save themselves a bunch of money too, while also being able to plan for the future, because as we know, they've been one of the best teams at planning for the future. Even if you looked at what they had in cap space going into this year, they had the most projected cap space for next year before this year, or top 3 for next year before they spent all the money retaining their own. So I think the Bucs will set themselves in a great position to keep going forward and have money to spend with even after Tom Brady retires. But right now they're in that position, like you said, being able to bring those guys back and really, keep that run going for as long as
Keep
Tom
it rolling. Keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Why not?
It's a big offseason for sure, and there could be some changes coming, but I don't think as much as maybe people on the outside think that there will be. I think they'll be able to, and they will, I think, keep a lot of what they have in house. But how the season finishes out, big for a lot of these situations for sure. And at that point, if you were willing, we would love to have you back on, I'm sure, to talk more about this next offseason. Once we get through the playoffs and all of that kind of stuff, we'll have more of your thoughts, I'm sure, coming. He is Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus, ladies and gentlemen, a contributor over at overthecap.com, which is the best place. If you're wondering about salary cap and contracts for players, go to overthecap.com. The information there is unbelievable. And obviously the stuff at Pro Football Focus is amazing as well. So follow him on Twitter at PFF_Brad on there. Brad, man, I know we kept you for a while, but the insight is tremendous, dude. We really appreciate the time.
No, thank you so much. I'm just glad that you like the Von Bell comp. That made my whole week.
I love it. I think it's spot on. That's exactly
Love
exactly what I was looking for. That's something just like that. I think it's perfect. So great stuff. We'll be back. We'll be back not till Monday. We're going to take a couple days. This is the most time you'll be away from us in a while. Wow, Bucs fans. Hopefully you don't miss us too much. But head on over to pewterreport.com if you haven't today. There are a ton of great Bucs stories up on the site. JC and I were listening to Bucs Total Access today, and that thing is a gold mine. Lots of good stuff from Arians over there. So head on over, check out some of the articles today, and there'll be more going up tomorrow, later today, maybe even on the site as well. So check out over some of the stuff we've got going on over there. Until Monday, though, thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.